This is a 2016 Honda CR-V, and this is an Arduboy FX-C. Honda for scale.
Humblemud.
I was recently given the opportunity to review the Arduboy FX-C, an open source handheld console with hundreds of games on it, as you can see advertised on the box here. And my thumbnail is not clickbait. As far as I'm aware, this is the thinnest commercially available handheld on the market. It's 5mm thick, about the size of a credit card, with a small but bright OLED screen at 128 by 64 pixels. It's tiny. And I was surprised I had never heard of this before, considering how heavily invested I am in indie games and handhelds and homebrew stuff, but here we are. Also, I just want to say, while Seed Studio reached out to me and sent this over for review, I am not being paid to review this. In fact, they're finding out my thoughts at the same time that you are. However, I do have a link in the description below and a discount code HUMBLE0P for 10% off, which I'd not be sharing if I didn't like the handheld, so spoiler warning I guess. So if you decide this might be for you after watching the video and want to save some money and support the channel at no additional cost, that's all provided below. Now, I have a ton of games to show off today. I believe this video contains over 60 of them, but first I have to explain who this is for exactly. With all the handhelds available nowadays, many at comparable prices to the Arduboy, you might understandably struggle to see what the appeal of this is at a glance. Well, I spent about 3 weeks deliberately trying to fit this little device into my life amongst all the other stuff that I've been playing, and I think I've got the answer. At any given moment, you can go on social media, pull up the news channel, or look at the latest headlines on Google and see the most awful thing that you have ever seen. And then 2 hours later, you could do it again and find something else that's equally awful or oftentimes even worse. I've been really conscious and especially sensitive to the effects that these kinds of things have on me lately. And so I started trying to replace any moment where I would normally go for a doom scrolling session on my phone for some time spent with my Arduboy. It was in these pockets of times when I was waiting in the car for Miss Humblemud to get out of work, or I had a quiet moment to myself waiting on the food in the oven or my coffee to brew, where I experienced the magic of this thing. The combination of its microscopic size, the non-committal nature of its games, and how easy it was to jump between hundreds of strange little creations gradually turned it from a novelty into something I genuinely looked forward to experiencing every day. Not only that, but because of its discrete nature, it's a device that actually makes sense to carry around just like I would my car keys or my wallet. Don't get me wrong, I love my Retroid Pocket 5, but I'd personally never carry that around with me at work or during a public outing of some sort, especially with the grip that I have on it that I consider essential but also adds to the bulk. I'm also pretty protective about my Vita and my 3DS because those aren't really being made anymore. But my little Ardu here has a nice plastic cover on the front and a metal casing on the back that keeps it protected, and more importantly, it never gets in the way. It's probably the most unobtrusive gaming device that I've ever owned. I'll admit, for the first few days, I struggled to see its place amongst everything else I have, and I started to wonder if I could even do this review. But fast forward to now, and I kind of feel naked if I leave the house without my Arduboy. Hands down, the coolest thing about the Arduboy is it has its own ecosystem. Right now, you can go to the Arduboy community website and see the latest games that have been developed for it, and there is even an in-browser emulator that allows you to try its games out. And really quick, on that emulation topic, I did want to address this because I know some people are going to wonder why you would need a dedicated Arduboy at all when you can just emulate. While you can emulate Arduboy games on other devices like Android or PC, and many of them will work, your mileage may vary when it comes to performance. Just while I was in the process of making this video, I ran into graphical rendering problems on Ardugolf no matter which Android emulator I used, got weird half-speed performance and ghosting on Ardinia and Bongi here, suffered input loss on the Curse of Astaroth when I was playing it on the PC all of a sudden, and keep in mind these are not just obscure games on the platform, they're some of the most popular ones, and none of these issues ever came up up for me on the actual hardware. Now, something else that makes the hardware special is that it's an educational tool for aspiring programmers as well. You can learn how to code on this thing and make your own games for free, upload them straight to the community site, and people can try them out, give you pointers on how to tighten your code, and download your game straight to their device so that they then can play it on the go. And you'll want to take this on the go. I personally love that it's so small and discreet that I can keep it in a shirt pocket all day without it being noticeable. Many of the games are what I would call arcade experiences, honestly just fun and simple time wasters, but there are also others that are surprisingly deep despite the device's shortcomings. The Arduboy has a very limited amount of CPU power and memory. In fact, it has no graphics engine to speak of. Its games are 1-bit, monochrome titles made purely via simplified C++ code, and many of the games often have minimal to no sound. As a result, the Arduboy honestly has more in common with something like the ZX Spectrum, the Dreamcast VMU, or even a TI-83 calculator than it does with something like, I don't know, a Steam Deck or Ein Odin. Heck, technically it falls short of even the original Game Boy in many respects. So while this device is out here being sold in the same time and place that emulation devices like the Miu Mini are for a comparable price, I think trying to compare those devices is sort of like trying to compare the SNES Classic to the Nintendo Switch just because they were both released in 2017. These devices are doing separate things and serve different purposes. If you want to emulate 40 plus years of gaming history, if you want ray tracing, if you want to play Pokemon at 4x speed, the Arduboy isn't going to do that for you. However, the fact that it can't do all those things that I just mentioned is also what ended up making the Arduboy so special to me after spending so much time with it. The boot time is non-existent, you just saw it. The battery life is crazy, like I seriously fell asleep playing it one night and it was still on when I woke up later. And if you're in the middle of a game and decide you want to go back to the main menu to try something else, you just simply hold up and down for a few seconds. And I'm sure you've heard the saying that limitations breed creativity. Despite the minimal amount of hardware in this thing, there are some truly great games here, and that's what you want to see, right? Alright, let's do an in-depth look at the games. Real quick, these are just the games that I've played so far and thought deserved a major shout, and there are plenty more that I haven't yet played. I hand selected the order of my list here so that you'll see a wide variety of games at different times. So you'll want to stay tuned because you don't want to miss that hidden gem that might surprise you. There may be a lot here. Catacombs of the Damned was the first game I saw on Arduboy that truly blew me away. I still struggle to understand how this is running so well. It's a dungeon crawling first-person shooter inspired by games like Hexen. You'll find yourself collecting scrolls and treasures and potions, all while dealing with a wide assortment of enemies. Bites and Nights opens with impressive graphics too, as the camera flies through this 3D castle environment. Perhaps surprisingly though, the game itself is actually a trading card game where you utilize different cards to take out your opponents. You can overpower the competition's warriors with your own and utilize status effects to turn the tides of battle, with the main goal being to attack the other player directly, Yu-Gi-Oh style, once you've rid them of their characters on the field. It's surprisingly deep too, with deck customization options and everything, and the player AI is actually pretty smart. Castle Boy is exactly what it looks like, a really solid Castlevania game for Arduboy. All the familiar trappings are here, the movement and gameplay feel like what you would expect if you're a Castlevania vet, and you can even use alternative weapons, just here you only have to press the up button. The game has a nice level of difficulty, again as you'd hope, and there are even boss fights. Listen to the Castlevania NES soundtrack while you play and you'll feel right at home. Now, as you guys may know, I became a huge fan of the ZX Spectrum last year, and one of my favorite classic games from that platform is Jetpack. Arduboy has an amazing port of this game. It's super simple. You're an astronaut trying to escape an alien-infested planet, so you're rebuilding your spaceship all while fending the alien hordes off with your lasers. The jetpack physics are great here, and this is such a good fit for this little handheld. And I showed this one off quite a bit earlier throughout the video, and for good reason. Ardu Golf Golf is an extremely impressive 3D mini golf game complete with 18 holes. You just decide your angle and the power and let it rip. The physics are incredibly impressive, but be careful because you can fall off the stage. The game runs a little slow, but I think that's to be expected considering everything that this is doing, and the slow speed of it makes it oddly calming and relaxing to play when you have downtime. Blob Attack was no joke my introduction to Puyo Puyo. As you may know, I just started my puzzle game journey recently, and this is the first Puyo Puyo style game I've gotten really into. I love the little character art on the side and how he reacts to how you're doing. Getting chains is addictive, and I love the little monster blobs. This is the puzzle game I play the most on Arduboy. In fact, it's one of the games that I play the most in general on this thing. It is fantastic. Long Cat is another puzzler I discovered shortly before making the video, and I had to put it in here. You play as a stretchy cat who is trying his best to fill up any space that he sits in. As you know, if it fits, I sits. There are 100 levels in this game, and it gets more and more complicated as you go. Also, you've gotta love his little thumbs up when you finally figure out the puzzle. Do you guys remember those big pillars that would slam down on you in Super Mario World so you had to like duck in the holes so you wouldn't get squished? Well, Hollow Seeker takes that idea and runs with it, literally. This is an endless running game where you try to go as far as you can without getting squished, all while inside of this giant cavern that compresses and decompresses ad nauseum. This is an underrated one that really provides an adrenaline rush as you just squeak by and get to safety. Now, there are a lot of great Game & Watch conversions on Arduboy, but Fire Panic is my personal pick since I've always really enjoyed that game. This is a game where you try to save people jumping out of burning buildings, and you basically try to parachute them into the ambulance. A nice surprise that this version of the game has, though, is that after you save a certain amount of people, there's an ambulance driving segment that you have to play in order to get to the next level. This wasn't a part of the original Game & Watch experience, and so it really wowed me when I first saw it. Dogfight was another recent addition to my Arduboy repertoire, and I had to include it. I cannot believe how good this game is. It's a first-person experience putting you right in the cockpit of this plane, complete with a radar and everything, and you're trying to take down all the enemies who are in the skies with you. And shooting hearts gives you your health back and keeps you in the fight. Now, I've tried to play retro first-person plane games before, like Warbirds on the Atari Lynx, but I have to tell you, this is the best one that I've played. It's a lot harder on the actual Arduboy screen versus playing it on the big screen, and I actually think that gives it more of a visceral and arcadey feeling. Arduventure is basically the flagship Arduboy game. It's a turn-based RPG where you embark on a quest to destroy 4 evil creatures who have been corrupting mostly the insects of your lands. You will fight tons of worms and beetles and stuff. The monsters aren't really the most inventive here, but this is a true old-school RPG experience with a lot of charm, a magical secret weapon to build, high encounter rates, and grinding and everything. I've played this one all the way through and overall really enjoyed my experience. There were countless times where I almost died only to level up and receive all of my health back so that I could then live to fight another day. That was one of my favorite little features about this game, sort of towing that line every single time. Arduventure has 4 separate biomes to explore, and the map is pretty big as you can see, even in this first area, so thankfully you can save in this game. It takes about 2 hours to beat if you want to see everything. Okay, let's do a simple and sweet one next. Squid Jump was such a blast to the past for me. This is a demake of the Squid Jump minigame that you could play on your Wii U gamepad prior to entering an online match in the original Splatoon. I can't tell you how big of a smile it put on my face when I found out that this existed on Arduboy, because honestly, I had totally forgotten about this and it unlocked a vivid nostalgic memory for me. And playing this really makes me hope that we can see some other stuff like this in the future. I feel like Dreamcast VMU minigames would make great candidates for Arduboy conversions as well. Wolfenduino is a port of the first episode of Wolfenstein, and it is incredibly impressive to see. Admittedly, I don't play this one as much as I thought I would. I think that if the backgrounds were simpler, similar to Catacombs' more flat look, I'd enjoy it a lot more. It's still impressive nonetheless, and everything is here. I just feel like the ambition of this results in a little bit of visual clutter. Still had to include it, of course. Now, Crates is an amazing game once you get the hang of it. You drive this little car around and deliver crates containing some undisclosed substance to different locations. Your first drop will tip off the police, who then chase you around the map, and they gradually send more and more after you. It can get chaotic, as you can imagine, but the pure speed of this game makes it so fun, and it never really gets frustrating. I also just can't get over how good the cars look with that pseudo 3D rotation, and I'm really impressed how well the waypoints work even on this tiny little screen. They're on the edges of the screen and they alert you to cop cars coming your way and delivery drop-off points and everything. Easily one of the most fun games on here. Alright, so I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't understand the title of this one for the longest time, but once I did, it was pretty funny. Glove is a conversion of Gauntlet that distills the formula down to its most basic parts. And a really simplified way to describe a gauntlet is a glove, so I guess that name is perfect. I'm just kind of dumb, I guess. Anyway, longtime fans of the show know that I'm a huge Gauntlet fan, and so Glove was actually the very first game I played on my Arduboy. It's still a mainstay in my rotation 3 weeks later. Yes, it's simple, but it's so well executed that I honestly enjoy it over certain real quote-unquote Gauntlet ports. Alright, and another arcade port, Arduman. Now, there are a lot of Pac-Man games on Arduboy like Paku Paku and even a version of the isometric Pac-Mania, but it's classic Pac-Man here that I wanted to highlight. It's so cool to have the entire map on this tiny screen. And everything you love about classic Pac-Man is here. Now, it is a little harder than the arcade original because the ghosts are really quite fast. They're a little faster than Pac-Man himself, but it's still really fun to just clear the map every now and then. Night Move is an incredible action puzzle game where you play as a knight chess piece who can only move in that traditional L shape. Now, you need to get to the heart piece, but that's easier said than done because of the way that the chess piece actually moves. You also want to try to avoid jumping on the same spaces because they will eventually break under your weight. This game has a surprising amount of tension because you have a limited amount of time to react, and I think it's just such a clever spin on a piece from a game that we've known for hundreds of years. Oh, and speaking of tension, Yellow Static is the one horror game that I wanted to include on this list. This released in July of this year, so it's one of the newer ones on this list, and it's a Backrooms-inspired game where you try to collect batteries to power up the exit door. However, there is a creature in here that you Backrooms fans may have seen before, and I am just in awe of how the tiny bleeps and bloops of this game managed to give me chills when the creature saw and started chasing me. The worst part in this particular case here is the battery was right there, so I had to run toward the creature. Check it out. Space Cab is the Arduboy's version of a Commodore 64 game called Space Taxi and is easily a standout. You are transporting people from one place to another in space. You have to manage your boosters while traveling through space, you have to refuel when your fuel is running low, and you've got to make sure that you put down your landing gear when you land so that you don't crash. And oh yeah, try not to land on the people themselves either. They don't usually respond well to that. Starduino Turbo is an SNES Star Fox style game on Arduboy. It is incredibly impressive, surprisingly easy to ascertain what is where despite the monochrome presentation, and is just another one of those games that you're frankly surprised even exists on this device. It is much more fun and works much better than you'd expect, especially on the tiny screen. Now, one thing I really like about the Arduboy is how it has recontextualized really old arcade games for me. Stuff that I haven't thought about or played in years feels surprisingly fun and different on this little guy. Asteroids is a prime example to add to that list. I completely forgot to include this game in my 70s shooters episode that I did, even though it probably belongs in the same conversation as stuff like Galaga and Space Invaders. Truthfully, I just have never been a huge fan of it. However, for some reason, playing it on this little device is a sublime experience. I've played more Asteroids on Arduboy than I've played Asteroids in my entire life, and I even had the PlayStation 1 version growing up. Bongi is a game you'll see come up all the time in Arduboy forum discussions if you look around, and for good reason. It's a really simple concept. You play as this little robot who tries to pop all the balloons with his harpoon. Bubbles may contain power-ups or things that modify the playfield or your controls or even kill you, so you've got to watch out. And since you're a robot, you also don't want to get any of that water on you either, so you either pop the balloons or they pop you. I love playing this one until I lose all of my lives. It's really hard to play just one level when it comes to Bongi. Mystic Balloon is an amazing platformer where you play as this little guy who can use balloons to float and glide where he needs to go. You simply try to get to the exit while collecting coins along the way for extra points. At any time, you can press up or down to see more of the playing field, something that a lot of top-down Arduboy games actually integrate into the gameplay, which is really handy for this tiny screen. And while the game is simple in concept, it's a great platforming experience with a lot of polish. It's always fun to catch the little ride on the fans like you see here, and I really like the little detail where if you lose health, like you get attacked by an enemy, you actually have less balloons. So when you've only got one and you lose that final one, that's it. And here's another Arduboy experience that really impresses and rises above arcade gameplay. Omega Horizon is a true Metroidvania game with ability gate progression, new weapons to unlock, and everything. It seems to be most inspired by Super Metroid, considering that rainy planet that you land in, and it is very fun and surprisingly tense. This is the next one that I'm aiming to beat personally. Sometimes the enemies can stun lock you, which results in some cheap deaths, but Omega Horizon is a short one and I've gotta see it through to the end. It's an incredibly impressive little game. Really fast, I'm going to run through my 4 favorite shmups that I've found so far. UAPs Must Die is a super cool isometric shooter in the vein of something like Viewpoint. You take down these pill-shaped, unidentified aerial phenomena as you careen through space. I have beaten this one, but it's one of those that never gets old. It has 2 modes of play, a 25 FPS version and a 50 FPS version that's double the speed. However, honestly, I prefer it at the 25 speed. That's where it feels just right. Juno First, I recently started playing, but I love so far. The rotating space that comes at you in a spherical fashion, kind of like Animal Crossing oddly enough, is super cool and unique for this platform. You can move back and forth and left and right, so you have defensive and offensive options. Super cool game. SFZ stands for Super Fantasy Zone. The anime girl design stood out for me, and I'm so glad that enticed me to click because it's so fun. This game combines the aesthetics and gameplay from Sega's Fantasy Zone and Space Harrier franchises to great effect. You go through a loop of enemies coming at you in that pseudo 3D superscalar style, dodging pillars that come at hyperspeed, and then you end up in a boss fight. After you defeat the boss, you loop back through the same level again, but it gets faster and more difficult, and I believe more enemies come up on screen too. This one is so fun, and is another that I just love to play through as many loops as I can until I finally die. But it's Ardubullets that is quite possibly my favorite shmup on here. The game generates a random seed every time, which dictates the enemy patterns that you'll face. You basically try to survive this seed until the time runs out, and that last 10 seconds feels like an eternity because it gets so difficult by the end. Thankfully, there is a difficulty select, and you can retry a seed as much as you want, and the game remembers the last one that you used. The random generation of the game really keeps it fresh. If you die, you just want to try again and again and again, and it's just a really addictive, perfect, bite-sized shmup experience. Rooftop Rescue will see you piloting a helicopter, trying to save people at the tops of burning buildings. They climb onto the rooftops and then you drop down your ladder to pull them up and fly them to safety. I see it as sort of a sibling game to Fire Panic, and in a similar fashion to that one, it can get pretty hectic as you have to juggle multiple simultaneous priorities. I really enjoy this one, even though I'm not the best at it. Micro Tower Defense is like Bongi in the sense that it's a bit of a cult classic on the Arduboy. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and despite its simplistic presentation, it's a really cerebral and addictive tower defense game. You'll be surprised at how strong some of the monsters get. It's so cool to me how a game with such minimal graphics manages to make you feel like you're literally trying to take down some sort of kaiju, shrugging off missiles and electrocution and all kinds of things. This is one I can't wait to dive into deeper. Circuit Dude is basically the premier puzzle experience on Arduboy. You control this little circuit dude who is trying to restore power to these little chips, but the puzzles get harder and harder as you go, and there's usually only a couple of ways to solve them. It reminds me a lot of Chip's Challenge in some ways, except I honestly think I like this one a little more. It's another one that gets a lot of praise and for good reason. Oh, and you can even play as Circuit Dude in Bites and Nights, which is really cool. Dazzle Dash is a platformer so good that it would fit right in with the classic platformers on Game Boy. The idea is to try to get to the end of the level as fast as possible, and while that is fun, just doing normal platforming stuff at your own pace is also very fun due to the strong level design, physics, and gameplay. What I personally like to do is learn the level layout at my own pace, grabbing all the collectibles and stuff, and then I go back through as fast as I can with that as my only goal. Either approach is valid, and I think that's what makes Dazzle Dash so easy to come back to. 1-Bit Rogue is my favorite little roguelike on the machine so far, mainly because of the awesome presentation and constant surprises. I'll admit sometimes you get really bad luck and meet your demise early, but other times you'll get a pretty decent run like the one I'm doing here. I really like that at the expense of a health point, you can literally break down a wall if needed to escape from your enemies. You never know what's going to be on the next floor, and the game constantly keeps you on your toes as you go deeper and deeper into the tomb. And sometimes it's best to leave the treasure unopened, by the way. Oh, and speaking of tombs, we now have to talk about Dark and Under, an amazing first-person dungeon crawling experience on Arduboy. When I first heard of this device and saw some of the games for it, this was weirdly one of the types of games I really hoped to see, and Dark and Under thankfully delivers on all fronts. I especially love the little mini-map that helps me stay on track, the battling is fun, and I think that the equipment and health pickups arrive at a perfect pace. Now there's also a sequel, Dark and Under 2, which has insane grayscale graphics on the Arduboy, and it's also a great game too with an expanded scope. You'll go out into open environments where you can enter taverns and all kinds of stuff. I will admit I'm currently more of a fan of the original Dark and Under, but both are fantastic, and I also think I'm just a little biased because I've spent a bit more time with the first one so far. However, I'm open to Dark and Under 2 changing my opinion. It certainly looks like it could. The Curse of Astaroth is an incredible puzzle turn-based RPG blend of a game with a Halloween aesthetic that I really enjoy. Everyone has been cursed and turned into jack-o'-lantern people, so you go on a quest to defeat the big bad at the end, going through waves and waves of monsters in turn-based battles. You battle them by selecting runes and trying to match them like you would a poker hand. So for example, getting things like 2 pairs, 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, full house, etc. will dictate how much damage you do to the enemy. The runic symbols that appear are random, but thankfully you can re-roll them multiple times, so it never feels unfair. The game also has predetermined rune sets that you can buy that grant you special properties. There is equipment and items and all sorts of stuff. This one is incredibly deep and impressive to see. Now there's also a Trials of Astaroth game set in the same universe with the same character that's more of a platformer style game, and I'm really excited to dive deeper into that one, but for right now, Curse has my attention. Virus LQP79 is a game that I would have never expected to see on Arduboy, nor would I ever have guessed that it would work so well. It's a miniature yet robust Zombies Ate My Neighbors experience with like 100 levels I think, multiple difficulty options and everything. While many of the Zombies Ate My Neighbors mechanics have been stripped, this is still a nice distillation of the experience where you take down zombies with squirt guns and save the unassuming denizens of your town. The presentation and sprite work is top notch, and I like the fact that the camera will lean towards whichever direction you're currently pressing, giving you just a little bit more viewing room to see what's ahead of you on that tiny screen. This is a wonderful game that I'd love to try to beat one day. Alright, let's stay on the zombie topic for one more. Zombie Slayer is a 2026 horde shooter that just came out where you can only shoot left and right, but it's a surprisingly deep and addictive game despite that limitation. Zombies come from all angles, so you have to constantly think about your positioning. You also have limited ammo, and reloading when your clip is empty takes much longer to do, so you have to really be aware of what's going on at all times and make sure you reload before that happens. Thankfully, there are occasional loot drops that allow you to choose upgrades for your character, keeping you in the fight longer and keeping the gameplay fresh. This is a really great game that I'm so glad I found when I was searching on the Arduboy community page, and I've sunk a good deal of time into it. Okay, I just have 3 more, and then I'm going to do a quick shout out to some ones that I have yet to get into but have heard a lot of great things about. Ardudaemon is a full-fledged Diablo type experience on Arduboy. This game is incredible. Per the developer's recommendations, I listened to the Diablo 1 village music while I played, and it really does add to the gameplay. Now, this has everything that you'd hope for despite the simplistic presentation. Hordes of monsters, loot drops where different equipment has different properties, and a rather long RPG experience that allows you to build out your character and make him stronger. I also think the game's saving system is rather genius. Just simply go up or down a staircase and the game will autosave. How cool is that? I have had so much fun with this one. This one was such a nice surprise for me to see. It's Questing Time literally released last week, and it's a turn-based JRPG that is a tribute to Dragon Quest. I love the sprite work of the main character and the monsters here, and the game is just as tough and grindy as the original Dragon Quests, with a surprisingly big and sprawling world to explore as well. At the same time, I like how it doesn't take itself too seriously. The town you start in is called Begin Grind, and one of the kids makes fun of how your name is Hero, just misspelled. And also there's a lady who complains about how her husband leaves his dirty socks everywhere, which unfortunately I think Miss Humblemud can relate to. Sorry about that. Anyway, I involuntarily said no way out loud when I saw that this had dropped, and I couldn't be happier with its Questing Time. It was something that I really felt was missing on the platform, but now we've got it. The way I found out about its Questing Time was on the Arduboy subreddit, and I left a comment there letting them know how excited I was to try it, and then someone reached out to me privately and asked me if I would like to try their demo for a game they made called Poulette A+. I initially said to myself that I wasn't going to include any unfinished games on this list, but because he reached out, I said I would include it if I liked it, and I did enjoy it, so here it is. Poulette, I'd say, is a sort of mix between Kirby and Mario, except your main character has a 45-degree angle dive bomb attack like Incineroar from Super Smash Bros. There are loads of power-ups that give you different attributes like extra health or the ability to glide, and it's just really solid and promising gameplay here. I can't wait for the full thing. Okay, one last batch of games I'd like to shout out because I think they really show off just how impressive and ambitious the people in this community can get here, and though I've not admittedly tried them out because honestly I'm just a little intimidated at the prospect of them, I still felt like they had to be mentioned because I know someone watching this is going to love these. There are full-fledged Arduboy versions of SimCity, Sid Meier's Pirates, and even Terraria on the Arduboy. Is that not insane? And while making this video, I also found out that there's even a Stardew Valley type experience on Arduboy. Now, not everything on the Arduboy is perfect. There will be a good handful of super impressive games that you'll find unfortunately were never finished for one reason or another, and oftentimes that's usually for being too ambitious or simply because the devs ran out of time. The Arduboy is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about in my PlayStation Killing Physical Games video, where the future of gaming, I think, is in these grassroots efforts, where the fans come together and make cool games. The Arduboy might not be the platform for you specifically, and I totally get that. Even for myself, I think it's more of a great companion handheld, not the main thing. I am nevertheless compelled by this little device and its wonderful scene of talented individuals who make these games for free in their spare time. I'll be honest, I expected to enjoy this, or at the very least think it was, kind of neat, but I didn't expect the Arduboy to sit so snugly into my gaming rotation amongst everything else that I play in the way that it has. In many respects, depending on what you're looking for and if you have the right expectations going in, I think the Arduboy is near perfect, and I'm saying that as someone who has no coding experience. Just imagine if you're someone on the other side of the screen who does and can see yourself making games on this. I can't wait to see what's next. And on that topic, someone please finish the Burger Time port. If I can start throwing pepper at my enemies, I can die happy. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.